America didn't begin with the Constitution, it didn't begin with a president, and it didn't truly begin on July 4th, 1776. The foundation of American government was built through rebellion, fear, secret meetings, and one dangerous question. What happens when ordinary people decide their rulers have too much power? That question helped create one of history's boldest experiments. But here's the part most people miss. After defeating a king, America created a government so weak that the new country nearly collapsed. Then, behind closed doors, a small group of men replaced it with something completely different. The Constitution we know today almost didn't survive, and even when it did, millions of Americans were excluded from its promise. So how was the American government really built, and why is that experiment still unfinished? To understand America, we have to go back, way back. In medieval Europe, kings claimed their authority came from God. You didn't vote for them, you couldn't remove them, and challenging their power could cost you everything. But in 1215, something unusual happened. English nobles rebelled against King John and forced him to accept the Magna Carta. Now, it wasn't democracy, not even close. Most ordinary people gained little from it. But the document introduced a powerful idea. Even a king wasn't completely above the law. That idea survived for centuries. Then it crossed the Atlantic. In 1620, the Mayflower's passengers arrived outside the territory where their original legal authority applied. That created a serious problem. Who would make the rules? Who would enforce them? And why should anyone obey? Before leaving the ship, the passengers signed the Mayflower Compact. They agreed to create a government and follow laws made for the good of the colony. Again, it wasn't modern democracy, but it introduced another explosive idea. Government could be created through an agreement among the people, not simply through orders from a king. Two ideas were now taking shape. The ruler must obey the law, and legitimate government requires the people's consent. Put those ideas together, and sooner or later, somebody challenges the crown. For generations, the American colonies remained under British rule, but Britain was far away. An ocean separated the colonists from the king. Messages could take weeks to arrive. So the colonies developed local assemblies, courts, and town meetings. Little by little, colonists became used to governing themselves. Then Britain needed money. After the French and Indian War, the British government faced a mountain of debt. Parliament believed the colonies should help pay it. So Britain introduced new taxes. But money wasn't the real issue. The colonists had no elected representatives in Parliament. Britain was saying, "We can tax you." The colonists responded, "Not without our consent." That's why the cry, "No taxation without representation," became so powerful. It wasn't just about tea or paper. It was about who had the right to make decisions. Then the situation exploded. British soldiers killed 5 colonists in the Boston Massacre. Protesters dumped tea into Boston Harbor. Britain punished Massachusetts with harsh new laws. But here's the twist. Every attempt to control the colonies only pushed them closer together. Britain wanted obedience. Instead, it helped create a revolution. At first, many colonists didn't want independence. They wanted their rights restored. They still saw themselves as British. Then, in January 1776, Thomas Paine published a small pamphlet called Common Sense. His message was simple. Why should a distant island rule an entire continent? And why should one family inherit the power to govern millions? Suddenly, independence didn't sound impossible. It sounded obvious. A few months later, the colonies adopted the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration argued that people possessed natural rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It said governments received their power from the consent of the governed, and if a government destroyed the people's rights, the people could change it or remove it. That was revolutionary. But there was a dark contradiction. The Declaration said all men were created equal, yet slavery continued. Women had almost no formal political power. Indigenous peoples were excluded and pushed from their lands. America announced a universal promise while denying that promise to millions. And that contradiction wouldn't disappear. It would haunt the country for generations. America won the Revolutionary War. Problem solved, right? Not even close. The Americans feared centralized power so much that they created an extremely weak national government. Under the Articles of Confederation, most power remained with the states. There was no independent president, There was no unified federal court system like the one we have today, and Congress couldn't directly collect national taxes. It could ask the states for money, but the states could simply say no. Imagine trying to run a country while 13 different governments pull in different directions. That was America's situation. The country had debt. States argued over trade. The national government struggled to enforce its decisions. America had defeated the most powerful empire in the world, but it couldn't properly govern itself. Then came the event that terrified the nation's leaders. In 1786, farmers in western Massachusetts were drowning in debt. Many had fought in the Revolution. They had risked their lives for liberty. Now, some were losing their farms and property. Led by Daniel Shays and others, armed protesters tried to stop courts from hearing debt cases. To many national leaders, Shays Rebellion looked like the beginning of chaos. But to the farmers, the government had stopped listening, and that created a new question. What if government was too weak to protect the country, but still strong enough to hurt ordinary people? America had fought against tyranny. Now, it had to avoid anarchy. The country needed a government powerful enough to survive, but limited enough to remain free. Could anyone create that balance? In May 1787, delegates gathered in Philadelphia. Their official mission was to repair the Articles of Confederation. Instead, they decided to replace them. The meetings happened in secret. The windows stayed closed, even in the summer heat. Inside, the delegates argued over almost everything. Large states wanted representation based on population. Small states feared they'd lose their voice. Some delegates wanted a strong president. Others feared they were creating another king. And slavery divided the nation before the nation had even fully formed. If the convention failed, the states might separate. But if it created a government with too much power, America could become the very thing it had fought against. So the delegates built a system around a surprising idea. Don't trust anyone with all the power. Not Congress, not the president, not even the courts.
The Constitution divided the federal government into three branches. Congress would make the laws, the president would enforce them, the courts would interpret and apply them. This became known as the separation of powers. But simply dividing power wasn't enough. Each branch needed ways to restrain the others. The president could veto legislation. Congress could override a veto with enough votes. The Senate could confirm or reject important appointments. Courts could settle constitutional disputes. These protections became known as checks and balances. In other words, the government was designed to argue with itself. Sounds inefficient, doesn't it? It can be, but that friction has a purpose. The founders knew power could be dangerous. So instead of trusting leaders to remain good forever, they created a system where power could challenge power. Authority was also divided between the federal government and state governments. That system is called federalism, and Americans are still arguing about it today. Where should federal authority end? Where should state authority begin? The Constitution didn't permanently end that debate. It created a structure in which the debate could continue. The Constitution survived because of compromise. Large states received representation based on population in the House of Representatives. Small states received equal representation in the Senate. That agreement saved the convention. But another compromise revealed the country's deepest injustice. Slaveholding states wanted enslaved people counted when representation was calculated, even though enslaved people had no political rights. The result was the 3/5 compromise. For representation and direct taxation, 3 out of every 5 enslaved people would be counted. Think about that. Human beings were included as numbers to increase political power, while being denied freedom and citizenship. The Constitution created a stronger republic, but it also allowed slavery's power to remain deeply connected to the new political system. America's foundation contained both liberty and oppression. Eventually, those two forces would collide. Even after the Constitution was signed, its survival wasn't guaranteed. The states had to approve it. Federalists supported the new system. Anti-Federalists feared the national government would become too powerful, and they noticed something alarming. The original Constitution didn't include a separate Bill of Rights. Where was the clear protection for speech, religion, the press, public assembly? The Anti-Federalists demanded answers. Their criticism helped force a major change. In 1791, the first 10 amendments were ratified. They became the Bill of Rights. And here's the unexpected reveal. The Constitution wasn't strengthened only by the people who supported it.
it was also strengthened by the people who distrusted it. American government wasn't founded on perfect agreement. It was founded on debate, suspicion, compromise, and the belief that nobody should hold unchecked power. The foundation of American government isn't just one document. It's an ongoing struggle between competing ideas: liberty and order, majority rule and individual rights, federal power and state authority, security and freedom. The Constitution can organize power, but it can't guarantee good leaders. The Bill of Rights can list freedoms, but paper can't defend freedom by itself. And elections can give people a voice, but only if people choose to use it. That may be the biggest lesson of all. The greatest threat to self-government doesn't always arrive wearing a crown. Sometimes it arrives quietly, when people stop paying attention, when leaders go unquestioned, when rights are treated as permanent, and when we, the people, becomes nothing more than ink on an old page. The American government was founded in 1787, but the experiment never ended. Every election, every court decision, every protest, every peaceful transfer of power, they're all part of the same unfinished story. Because in a republic, power is supposed to begin with the people. And if power begins with the people, so does responsibility.